Hello, I'm Regina Botros, and this is Backstage, where we talk with the who's who on stage, in dance, comedy and performing arts, speaking with the leading theatre makers of our times and how they came to the stage and what drives them and inspires them. The Edit is on at Belvoir 25A. Legit Theatre Company is teaming up with Unlikely Productions to stage this world premiere of Gabrielle Scawthorn's The Edit, about the underbelly of reality television, and one of the two on the stage is Matilda Ridgeway, along with Iolanthe in this two-hander. You might have seen Matilda in Belvoir, other productions including Master and Margarita, Rep Season, Artists at Work, Jasper Jones. She's also been across many stages of Bell Shakespeare, Ensemble Theatre, Sport for Jove, and is just back from Coriolanus, a great production. She was terrific in it. And joining us is the writer and director, Gabrielle Scawthorn. She is a performer as well and has toured the Confessions around the world, including the National Theatre. She's performed on stages like the Seymour Centre, Darlinghurst Theatre, Sport for Jove, and so many others, and spent a year recording interviews for her podcast, Back from Reality, which has led to The Edit. Welcome both to Stages.
Thanks so much for having us.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming on. So before we get into the backstory and these what sound fascinating interviews, Matilda, do you want to set up who you are and what is the world of The Edit?
Yes. So, well, I can say some things. If the play is twisty and turny and has all kinds of jump scares, to use one of the character Nia's terms, I play somebody called Jess, who works on a reality television show called Match or Snatch, which is sort of like a Love Island or a Bachelorette. But she's just met this brand new contributor called Nia, who's a young woman who is about to enter the house, the mansion, and hopefully find love. And I guess Jess and Nia look at each other as, I guess, a potential partner for success, that Jess sort of wants to go from starting out as a runner or a handler, a minder, and she has her eye on a higher career trajectory. And obviously Nia wants to find love and also potentially, I guess, find fame, like so many of the contributors on the reality shows do. But obviously, because it's a world of reality television, everything isn't what it seems. Lots of people who are in it for themselves, willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want, and are willing to sort of lie, steal, cheat, do whatever is required. Yeah.
At any cost, it sounds like.
At any cost.
What a great idea for a stage show. I don't know that I've seen anything like it. I mean, we've gone into that sort of social media world, but I just love this. Gabrielle, Gab, I'm assuming, did the podcast come first?
Yeah, so we started doing the podcast in lockdown, the first lockdown in the UK, and the Arts Council in England had commissioned that, and then they commissioned the play to come out of the interviews. So with my findings from the interviews, I then wrote the play as a result of it, yeah, and the Arts Council England supported us throughout.
But you have it sounds like a little bit of a background in this world.
Yes, and then I was on reality television when I was 17 years old, and I was quite mentally unwell after that, and as a result of how I was treated in reality television. And so that's really where the podcast was born, because it was lockdown. Everyone was kind of going, what do we do now to make money? What's our side hustle? Because we can't go into a theatre. And my husband said, well, you have that unique point of view of having a nervous breakdown post-reality television. And I was like, yeah, that is unique. So that's where the podcast was born, and talking about mental health and what life is afterwards. And yeah, so perfect research for the show.
So through these interviews, and it looks like you've spoken to all kinds of reality shows or people from across a very broad range of them. I guess Where did you want to start? I mean, you've already mentioned mental health and the post, experience of it. But are we in the world? We're not after. We're sort of investigating the treatment within it, or the individual within the world, or I don't know. How did you know where to start?
It spans. Yeah, I think. Well, there's that quote, isn't there, of get in at a good place and get out quickly when you're writing. So you get in at the point in which the information has to be said. A critical point is where you want to start. And so the night before entering a reality television world is pretty critical. So that's where we start. And then the play finishes after the contributor is released from the house. And that's when I was doing the interviews, I started to really notice a very stark difference between reality contributors who have been living in a house. My son is just running towards me. And reality contributors that live in their own environment. Because when you live in your own environment, like a Real Housewife or something like that, you have full control over your environment. But when you're in a house like The Bachelor or Big Brother, you are a koala. Sorry, the show is also it's been family friendly when we're making it. Not the content is not family friendly. But this is my child on my tummy and me with my shirt up at Taronga Zoo. Yeah, there was a real difference between people who aren't living in a world controlled by production and people who are. So I thought, right, well, our play has to be living in the world, because producers were telling me that they were doing things like, they withhold medication and they dole it out at a different time of day to interfere with a woman's hormonal trajectory. They will put excess sugar in a food to make sure that someone has a sugar spike right before they're meant to do a confessional or something like that. So the level of control that production has in the reality television world is quite shocking. And so, of course, all of these shocking things happen on reality television because very gently and very subtly, contributors are pushed to their absolute limits. And so it's very difficult for a contributor to look at that behaviour after, because they go, well, I wouldn't normally behave like that. And no, they wouldn't. But they're very subtly herded into these corners of their humanity. And I thought, gosh, that's an interesting starting point for a play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does say, one of the early things it says, I mean, I read somewhere, there's like multiple, there's a paragraph of content warnings in this production. Matilda, you want to talk about some of those other places that it goes?
Absolutely not. You'll have to come along.
Totally.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I find really fascinating about it is that it does feel like you're watching a kind of battle royale between two people who are within a system that has its faults. Reality television is a sort of a guilty pleasure for those who partake in it. And I think both the contributors and the people who work on it are trying to use this guilty pleasure, this sort of ticket to fame or whatever, to get something out of it. And it's just really interesting to see, I guess, the people inside the machine. What are people willing to do? Where do they draw their lines in terms of how do they want to look at themselves in the mirror at the end of the day? And I think it is really tricky for people who are the contributors on the shows, because even with actors, I think sometimes you think, oh, I don't want to play a terrible person because people might look at me and hate me. And I guess for these contributors, they don't even get to have control over how they're portrayed. And then everybody thinks that they're actually like that when they've been, deprived of sleep, not given enough food, plied with heaps of alcohol, whatever it is, made to look their worst selves. And then that's been presented as, a standard day for them. Yeah, it's really tricky to navigate.
Is there any, I mean, the first question I was thinking as you were both talking then is about, why don't they leave? Do they want it so much that they can't? Or are they gaslit or kind of made to feel like they have no control then?
It's such a great question. I mean, I think the producers and the handlers and the minders do a really great job of establishing a relationship with the contributors. So you feel like you have a friend in there, somebody that you can talk to, who can kind of talk you off the wall, talk you off the ledge if you look like you're going to run. Or gaslight you into thinking that running might be the worst thing you can possibly do. Come back, tell your side of the story, let them see who you are, all that sort of stuff. The manipulation is so extraordinary.
Yeah, right. And Gabrielle, are there any good stories that come from it? People that do find the love, etc., or the fame?
Yeah. No, there's heaps of them. That's just not interesting theatre. And also all of those stories we know a lot about because the reality television PR loves to pump those out. There are still people from, Married at First Sight who have families now, and there are people from Love is Blind who have families. So there is, and there are great stories about working class people who go into the reality television world and they are loved beyond imagine and they have these really successful careers. So, and also, I mean, I love reality television. That's the other thing. I just love it. So I had to investigate the ethics behind it because I want to convince myself that it's okay for me to watch it. And there are fantastic shows. I mean, Love on the Spectrum is fantastic, and it is done in such tonally, it is done beautifully, and it's also negotiated on such an equal footing with its contributors. I was lucky enough to speak to Kian, the creator of that show, and it's now won Emmys and all sorts of things because they have an American season. So there's fantastic reality television, and Survivor is my personal favorite. But there's also another side to that with people who are working class or people who are not, people who have pre-existing vulnerabilities who make the perfect contributors as far as production is concerned. And yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm kind of looking at my son, making sure he doesn't jump into a koala enclosure. So I think I've veered off path.
Otherwise, you might have to see you in a Survivor mode, I suppose, as we watch.
You know what?
I was going to say one thing. Would you go on Survivor?
Absolutely. And I was just about to say that. Absolutely. I don't think they'd have me because I was interviewing a psychologist who works on Survivor, actually. And he said you would not make, there's this whole test that they do, a huge, it's 12 pages long, this psychological test. And I did it. And he said you would not be a good candidate because I'm an actor. They don't really like actors. I think Pia Miranda kind of just took that one slot. And so they don't like us on there anymore. Apparently I'm not a viable candidate for reality television anymore.
Why as an actor? Because you'd think an actor would be good because they're on the ball.
Maybe not as malleable. They're not as malleable, potentially.
Too truthful.
Exactly. And also, to be fair to Survivor, I don't know if my physical prowess is quite there. Do you know?
Well, we've got to let you go and jump in that.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for letting me just jump on. Tilly, Chookers, babes, have a great show.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. So one last thing about your role. Does she find love? Oh, well, you don't want to give it away, but how does she change? Does she become more real? I mean, what reality is about, the reality of life. So I suppose, is there something that it goes beyond the show?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that the show is in the world of reality television, but like any great play, I think it has to speak to that world, but then I think it also has to speak to us as people. You know, it's a show where if you love reality television, you're going to get a lot out of it. But if you hate reality television, you're also going to get a lot out of it. You know, I had a friend who was like, oh, it's just people inside capitalism the other day, you know, who was just like, oh, it's just people inside any kind of corporate machine, you know, or anybody who sort of has a teammate that they're sort of forced to work alongside. Yeah, I mean, I think that Jess does find some love. You know, she also gets her heart broken, you know. So, poor thing.
Well, the reality of love.
It's good. It's a wild night in the theatre. I know. Yeah, it's been pretty great. We've had sort of standing ovations the last couple of shows, and audiences genuinely writhing around and screaming, no, and gasping and all that kind of stuff. So, like, if you're, you know, it's a sort of night that you can't have on your little television screen, you know? It's very visceral.
In the room, in the reality room. Matilda Ridgeway, thank you so much for joining me. It just sounds brilliant.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Matilda Ridgeway there, and Gabrielle Scawthorn earlier, the actor and the writer and director of The Edit on at 25A Belvoir. It just sounds like a knockout. Get along and see it.